And when we think about this digital learning series, we really want to make sure that we're thinking about building students' digital literacy. So we start with organizing and saving and organizing files, but really getting them all the way up to the area where they're creating in multiple modes of media. And when we think about these digital timelines, really thinking about how are we encouraging our students to curate information and create digitally and then share it to the general public. We want to make sure that we're giving our students the opportunity to know what it feels like to share globally, to share their information with colleagues, and to get feedback from their friends, from their classmates, from teachers and people in other schools. So really thinking about that when we're giving our students the opportunity. Though it may be challenging at first, whether it's logistics of how am I getting the computers into my classroom? Do I have enough time with the computers? Or the logistics of how do I get my students online and accessing this tool? In the long run, all of the challenges will be well worth it in the end, because our students will leave with these digital literacies, with a strong digital literacies foundation. Okay? So with all that being said, and just so you know, you received an interactive agenda that will provide links to all of the different activities that we're doing. It also has all of the links for the history webinar that Thomas and Jonathan are going to walk us through. So if you have any questions, I am available online. So if you're in the Google Classroom, I'll answer questions that way. Or if you're in one of the Google Docs, you can go ahead and post questions and I will happily address them. Okay? And so I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Thomas and Jonathan and let them get us started.
Awesome. Hello, everyone. I'm Thomas Ketchell, and this is my brother, Jonathan.
Hi.
And thanks for the introduction, Natasha. So let me share my screen and kind of get going. So first, before we go in and show the tool, I thought it would be a good opportunity to kind of describe the story behind history and why me and my brother are working on it full time. So really the idea for History, it's a free platform for teachers and students to create interactive timelines and projects. They can explore timelines and projects created by History, but also by our community of teachers from all over the world. And really our goal is to engage students, and that's really why we built History. So the idea behind History actually started out when I was living in Beijing, China. And I was confronted with this scene every single day. It was very polluted, it was smoggy, and it wasn't that pleasant to live in. And I was telling my friends and family back home of what it was like to actually live in Beijing, and this was taken a couple of years ago. But they didn't quite believe me. And being a historian and being very passionate about this, I decided to look back on history, and one event really stood out for me. So this was the London Great Smog of 1952. It was the single worst man-made air pollution disaster ever. 12,000 people died in the space of 5 days in London. And what we decided to do to sort of get people talking about air pollution was to create a fictional character, someone who woke up in 1952, had a smartphone and started tweeting. And he tweeted using one hashtag, Great Smog. So we built this whole story from primary sources, from personal anecdotes, from stories that were shared online, and we had some great collection of photographs which were shared. And we used it all on Twitter using this one hashtag, Great Smog. It really built up a story, and it built up quite the audience. So we had 422 tweets over 5 days, and we reached 1.5 million people on Twitter. So that was the original idea for History. And since then, we've really built a platform which is very inspired from social media. So you might see resemblances with parts of Facebook or parts of Twitter, but for an educational context in the classroom. And so History now, from when we started in 2014, has grown phenomenally. So now we're at over 160,000 users in 136 countries. We get about 50,000 weekly active users, and we're extremely proud and happy that BPS have taken the initiative and provided History for all of you educators. So we're really happy with that collaboration because we are a Boston-based company. We've also won numerous awards which have helped a lot of our growth. So that's been through the American Association of School Librarians. EdSearch picked us as one of the core tools of the year, and Massachusetts Technology and Leadership Awards chose us as the EdTech Product of the Year. So that's really to give you some background as to History and why we started it. But now I'll let Jonathan actually dig deep into the tool and show you how it works. If we're speaking too fast, then Natasha, you could just tell us to slow it down. And if there's anything that's unclear, Jonathan will make sure to, and I will make sure to answer them. So to kickstart, Jonathan, you can take it away with the webinar timeline, which is actually linked in all the Google Docs, so you can access this timeline online. So Jonathan, take it away.
Hello everyone, so my name's Jonathan, I'm Thomas's brother and the editor-in-chief at History. I came pretty early on in the project. I'm a past teacher and also a writer, and I've actually truly been amazed by how versatility of this tool and how different ways you can use it. I've picked out some examples linked to more social studies content, but we also have users in mathematics, science, and teachers and students who have been using our platform. I'm first of all going to focus more on the historical aspect. I've chosen one example here of a photographic timeline of a soldier's life during the Civil War, which I imagine some of you study with your students. There's been this recent trend to open up archives. If you think about the Library of Congress and you think about the National Archives, they've actually slowly putting their resources out on different platforms, including Flickr, which some of you may know is a photo sharing website. All these photographs, which I found here, which you can see, all date back to the Civil War. As you can see, they're very static, the people in the photo, because photography at the time did not actually portray movement very well. If you look at this photo, for example, you could see the American flag, which is actually waving. But because of the movement, the camera couldn't sort of capture that image. So this is what I did. This is one example of using great resources which are out there, putting them on the timeline and making the students take interest in them. So this was basically me speaking of, this is one of the timelines which is part of the history content, which you will have access to for social studies in middle school. And so what is I speak about using all these photographs to tell the story of the Civil War. What was it like for a soldier? What did he eat? What was his daily routines? What kind of jobs did he have? I'm just gonna show you also the different, take notice of the different kind of elements we have. We have green boxes, we have white ones, images, did you know facts. But you can also upload, for example, some audio files. Yeah, sorry for that. That was just an example of the Johnny Came Marching Home, which you can find on the internet, which was one of the songs they sang at the time to keep up morale. I'm just going to move on to a next example. This is the Ancient Olympic Games. This is for a younger age group. It was more for like the end of elementary school. It was part of our unit on ancient Greece, which we did. I really take the opportunity when I do these timelines to actually move outside the strictly social studies scope. It's very important for me that it's cross-curricular, but also that it connects to the present. But before I get to that, I just wanted to show you this cool feature we have. If you notice some of these blue items we have here, but these are actually notes. So they're small definitions which you can add yourself to a timeline without needing for an external link. So here's one I did about Philip II, I have one about Alexander the Great. It's really good for explaining further, but also providing definitions. So I really took the opportunity here to make it fun because, yeah, not only is history fun, but also sports are fun too. So looking at the shape of the body of the athletes, do you think they are doing fast running or long distance running? In this case, fast running, yeah, the runners are taking large paces and swinging their arms to get the maximum speed. By the way, everything you can see here, you can create it too. This is just an example to show you different uses of the tool. This is very funny here, the pancreation, which was one of the ancestors of the wrestling, which we have today in boxing, sort of a mixture of both. But at the time, you were permitted to do a lot of things, including attack the genital. And yeah, so I was talking about connecting to the present. Here I just started speaking about comparison between the modern and the ancient Olympics with a set of quiz questions. These quiz questions are really an opportunity for the student to look a bit further into the subject. Not so much as an analytical tool, but more as a different way to approach the content. Just going to move on here. This person here is actually Thomas and I's grandfather. Unfortunately, we never knew him. This was his photo taken when he was 18 in 1916. So he was drafted into and went to the First World War. And when was it? It must have been in summer 2015. I was at my parents' home and I was going through my old things, and I stumbled across a chest full of old papers and documents. And I looked deeper into it, and I realized it was my grandfather's old affairs, which our father had kept. And so I started to see these old photographs, including this one. And the more I dug into it, and I went to ask my father, I said, yeah, I knew he had been at the war, but I didn't know what happened. So I asked him, and he said, my father our grandfather never actually spoke to our father about the story, what happened because of the horror. So he never knew exactly. He had an idea of maybe him being injured, but he wasn't sure. So I actually dug through everything. It was a real archivist kind of job. But I must admit, it was one of the most relevant things I've done in my adult life as I sort of pieced together his story. And I made two timelines out of it, actually, divided into two parts. So he joined the war in 1916. So I took this opportunity to speak of what the situation was on the Western Front at the time. And he was called up upon in 1916. I think I have his certificate here. This was the National Registration Act. So this is one of the papers which I stumbled upon, and then I scanned later, and then I put onto this timeline. So this was the national registration, which the whole UK government at the time did to actually figure out how many men they had at their disposal. Because like many wars, they thought the war was going to end very quickly, but it ended up dragging on and dragging on. And so he joined in 1916, and I followed everything. I scanned his whole story. It was very interesting also because at the same time I realized that my great uncle, Jack, which you can see on this photo, so Jack, he actually joined the war. He was older than our brother, so he was there since 1914. You can see him here in this picture here, doing a very British thing, drinking tea. Traditions don't always change that much. But yeah, so their lives were actually intertwined. And as I was going through the whole documents, I realized that they actually met at one bit, and it was a whole, you can really go through the story if you want. It's a really fascinating story. Also show you that there are fantastic archives out there. These are it's a video which I found on YouTube of fresh recruits which were training during the war. This is actually doesn't have any sound, that's why you can't hear anything. But there's some fantastic archives out there, and I think history is the perfect tool to really showcase that, certainly from a historical perspective. Now I'm just going to move on to, because history works for history, obviously, but it also works for geography.
Yeah, and just to emphasize that personal history piece, what we've noticed from schools across the country in the US is that teachers are getting their students to create their own personal history projects. And a lot of teachers have been inspired from what we did with the story of our grandfather and getting the kids to really explore their heritage and their story. And it really is a very easy tool for teachers to get their students on board, look up their family history, and then create a timeline about it, which they then present to their parents and their classmates. And it makes for fascinating reading, actually. So yeah, go continue, Jonathan.
No, that's a good point, especially in the USA, where local history is very strong. It's a good point. That's true. Yeah, this is actually a timeline we did also about the geography of United Arab Emirates. It was at the time Thomas went to do a presentation over there, so we thought we might as well speak a bit of this country, which not many people know much about, apart from the Dubai, the tower. But, so yes, we also realized how our timeline tool works very well for this kind of project. And it also makes me realize that maybe now's the moment to say that our timeline tool is not so much a timeline tool, but maybe more of a presentation tool. A new good way to present content and show it to your student or to your students or to your teacher. I wanted to highlight here one of the quiz questions we have, which is the drag and drop one. Here you can see I have a quiz question about the deserts throughout the world. So match the facts to the deserts. So what do? The Atacama Desert. Is it the largest polar desert, non-polar desert, the driest desert, or the coldest desert? If I get it wrong, no. Then I put it here to the correct. Sahara Desert. Is it the coldest? No, it's the largest non-polar desert. And the coldest desert is the McMurdo Dry Valleys in Antarctica. This is one of the cool features we have. Again, it's all in the aim of increasing engagement. I also realized when I was doing how easy it was to use these kind of speak of things outside, again, of the scope and be cross-curricular. Took this opportunity to speak a lot of biology and fauna and flora, including the sound the fruit bat can make. Here we have, example of a civics project. I chose something very contemporary, as we are in election kind of season in the USA. I like this timeline in particular because it's actually an incentive for the student to actually think about the whole process. It's not just a simple presentation of facts, but this is actually a teacher timeline, so it's not created by us and shared with the community. So the teacher here took a variety of resources and shared them with his students. As you can see here, using all these great resources which you can find on YouTube and all kinds of websites, all in the goal to increase engagement and to make students think. You have a particular question here, which is a forum question. This is actually an incentive to begin a discussion, because what you cannot see on this kind of timeline at the moment, because it's the teacher view, the student view enables you to comment on each post. And the forum question, kind of like you have on Facebook. And the forum question in this respect is really an incentive to start class discussions. When we were piloting history at the start, we realized how powerful this could be. How all of a sudden, students who were very shy and very quiet actually had a voice and were daring to say what they wanted to say. And it was also very interesting to see how students were actually bouncing off each other. And the teacher was just sort of mentoring it from a distance, but wasn't actually involving. And the students were learning by themselves or by communicating with themselves. So I'm going to move on. Yes, what I want to highlight now is the copy the timeline feature. This is we think one of the cornerstones of our tool, because it enables you to do an assignment on history. If you see here, under the banner, you have this copy the timeline here. By clicking on this, students will have the same timeline, and then they can fill it up, review it, and submit it back to you. So it effectively turns this timeline tool into an assessment tool, an assignment tool. I'll give you, here's an example here we created of a 10-minute task. So the goal here was this is part of another timeline, but the goal here is to put all these events under either the Paleolithic or the Neolithic age. I added extra complexity by asking the students to fill in the question mark. So that means they have to go on the internet, find the correct image, and upload it. So really, it really is the perfect template kind of approach to a timeline. And I wanted to finish by presenting you some student projects, because it's great to consume information, but it's a lot better if you actually create, and that is one of the cornerstones. We really tried to make it as simple as possible so that even a 5 to 6-year-old can start using history. I took an example here of Bass Reeves, who you probably know, and just to show you also how I thought this is a student made by maybe, I think it was 8 or 9 years old. just to show you how this kind of timeline is the perfect blend of the digital and the physical. As you can see here, the students wrote out what happened to Base during his whole life, but he also matched it to his Lego creations, which he took photos of and uploaded to our file. It's a pretty entertaining read. I suggest you go through it whenever you have time. Again, I've really been amazed at the creativity, not only of the teachers, but I must say especially of the students, who always find original ways to use our tool.
Yeah, so I think this is a good segue to actually show you the timeline tool and how to get signed up, and show you how simple it is. You know, this timeline is public, so you can go in there and look at the examples some more, and really to highlight the creativity of students and teachers, and just show you how simple it is to create. But we'll also look more at our platform too. So first thing I'll do is, you can follow, if you're following it online, you can do the same steps too. So type into the search bar www.hstry.co. A lot of teachers ask us why we chose that name, which I didn't actually explain at the start. So we went with that name at first because we realized that a lot of kids were actually weren't writing the full word history, and this was sort of text speak for writing history. So we wanted to really appeal to them. I know some teachers have fallen in love with it, and other teachers aren't big fans of it, but we're really following with what the students like about it. So on the website, you can see we have a timeline of the month, which is Magellan's Great Expedition. And this was a featured timeline. We also have some more featured timelines here, which you can just view and access.